Today, we are going to introduce a name that is rapidly becoming popular among physicians in the United States: OpenEvidence. In the medical world, new research, new drugs, and new guidelines are updating our knowledge almost daily. The half-life of the knowledge possessed by physicians is shortening at an unprecedented rate. Many clinicians have a similar experience. When encountering difficult and complex cases, they often need to repeatedly consult authoritative guidelines such as PubMed, UpToDate, and NCCN in a short period of time, while also cross-checking insurance coverage lists and FDA prescribing information to gradually piece together a relatively clear clinical pathway. This not only consumes a significant amount of time but also invisibly increases the cognitive burden on physicians. It is against this backdrop that OpenEvidence identified a genuine pain point on the clinical front line. It is a professional medical decision support platform driven primarily by artificial intelligence. It can integrate and analyze high-quality peer-reviewed medical literature in real time, including research findings from top-tier journals like the New England Journal of Medicine, NEJM, and the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA. Users simply need to ask questions using natural language, and the system quickly generates evidence-based professional responses to directly assist in clinical decision-making. Notably, OpenEvidence made history by becoming the first AI system to achieve a perfect 100% score on the United States Medical Licensing Examination, USMLE, a milestone that has drawn widespread attention from the medical community. In terms of user experience, OpenEvidence provides both a web version and a mobile app, covering both iOS and Android systems. Since its launch, OpenEvidence has spread rapidly among U.S. physicians, achieving viral user growth almost entirely through word of mouth among colleagues. Currently, it is used daily in over 10,000 hospitals and medical centers across the United States, with more than 40% of U.S. physicians logging into OpenEvidence during their clinical work to assist in high-risk treatment decisions. It is estimated that in 2025, over 100 million American patients received medical services provided by doctors who used OpenEvidence. Next, we will take you through the actual operation of the OpenEvidence online interface to see how this AI clinical decision tool obtains evidence-based medical support in just a few seconds. First, I would like to introduce how a general, non-logged-in user can search for and obtain basic medical information on OpenEvidence. Let's look at the OpenEvidence interface. Without logging in or registering, anyone can use the platform directly. Of course, there are certain limitations on the scope of access and the number of uses. In the current interface, we can see Log In and Sign Up in the top right corner, but we haven't clicked them here. The overall structure of the page is very simple, containing only a central question and answer input box. There is no sidebar or list of chat options on the left as one might find in ChatGPT. Therefore, this is the basic interface presented to all users in a non-logged-in state. Below, we will use a specific example to demonstrate how an ordinary user asks questions and retrieves information on OpenEvidence. First, we ask a very common question. What is the latest diagnostic standard for hypertension? The system gives an answer very quickly. Looking at the structure of the answer, OpenEvidence typical output usually consists of multiple layers. It starts with academic-style text that directly responds to the question, clearly articulating the core conclusion in 3 to 4 paragraphs. Looking at the specific answer, the diagnostic standard for hypertension is a systolic blood pressure of 130 millimeters of mercury or higher, or a diastolic blood pressure of 80 millimeters of mercury or higher. This standard needs to be confirmed by multiple measurements taken over at least 2 or more visits, with the average calculated. This standard was established by the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association in 2017 and continued to be adopted in the 2026 American Diabetes Association guidelines. It is worth noting that OpenEvidence does not stop once it provides the answer. It further points out that this standard has not yet reached a complete global consensus. For instance, Europe still uses its own diagnostic standards for hypertension. Additionally, diagnosing hypertension requires multiple blood pressure measurements rather than a single reading. The system also added explanations regarding the posture requirements for standardized blood pressure measurement, including The patient should be seated with feet flat on the floor, the arms supported and at the same level as the heart, measured after at least 5 minutes of rest, and using a cuff of the appropriate size. From this example, it can be seen that OpenEvidence does not provide a single conclusion. Instead, it presents evidence from different regions and guidelines simultaneously, allowing users to compare and judge. This reflects the fundamental principle of evidence-based medicine, relying on multiple strands of evidence rather than a single viewpoint. Next, you can see that after every answer, OpenEvidence attaches links to the corresponding literature citations. For example, in the answer about hypertension diagnostic standards, we can see a link to a document from the American Diabetes Association, ADA. This is a very important and prominent feature of OpenEvidence. Many AI tools provide links, but they often lead only to a website or secondary information source. As for where the original evidence is, users still have to search for it themselves. OpenEvidence, however, provides the most direct original literature sources. These documents are the core basis for physicians during clinical treatment and for insurance companies when determining whether to pay for related medical expenses. Whether a treatment plan conforms to existing guidelines and consensus often directly determines whether it is approved. This is one of the reasons why OpenEvidence is used by a large number of doctors in the United States. The literature links it provides are true evidence-based medical sources, not self-media, news reports, or the personal experience summaries of individual doctors. When we click on this ADA literature link, we can see that the system immediately jumps to the original article published by the American Diabetes Association, allowing us to look up the information we are truly concerned about. It must be emphasized that these documents are not randomly generated content. They are the result of rigorous peer review by a large number of experts, particularly those from well-known hospitals and university research institutions. This is what is known as peer review. It is precisely these strictly vetted documents that constitute the most important basis for medical practice and insurance decision-making. Even for non-medical professional users, understanding these documents is of practical help for their own medical care, insurance payments, and the popularization of medical knowledge. Of course, it should be noted that the number of questions currently allowed for non-logged-in users on OpenEvidence is limited. The specific limits may vary by region, and users can try for themselves. Next, let's briefly introduce how medical professionals log in to OpenEvidence. After clicking Log In, the system requires inputting an email address and other information, and ultimately, one must provide a medical professional identification credential, such as the NPI, National Provider Identifier, used in the United States. After verification through this number, you can enter the professional version interface. The main difference between the professional version interface and the ordinary version is the addition of a functional sidebar on the left, where you can view conversation history, create new conversations, and manage different cases or problems. The overall interface is still centered on the dialog box, with a clear structure and a logic of use similar to the ordinary version, but closer to the clinical usage scenario. A latest study evaluated the performance of OpenEvidence in providing evidence-based medical recommendations for 5 common chronic diseases: hypertension, hyperlipidemia, type 2 diabetes, depression, and obesity in primary care. The study retrospectively analyzed 5 patient cases. Physicians raised specific clinical questions and evaluated the expert opinion responses based on clarity, relevance, evidence support, impact on clinical decision-making, and overall satisfaction. 4 independent physicians used a 0 to 4-point scoring scale. The results showed that in all cases, OpenEvidence provided accurate and evidence-based recommendations consistent with the physician's treatment plans. OpenEvidence received high scores in clarity, relevance, and evidence support, which helps physicians in decision-making regarding common chronic diseases. At the same time, the study emphasized that OpenEvidence mainly serves to strengthen rather than modify existing treatment plans. From an overall evaluation, OpenEvidence is not a tool that replaces doctors, but a medical technology platform that highly emphasizes evidence-based medicine, literature traceability, and clinical logic consistency. Of course, it must be emphasized that OpenEvidence, as an AI tool, can potentially make mistakes. When conditions permit, it is still recommended that users return to the original literature for verification rather than blindly relying on the conclusions provided by OpenEvidence. Many audience might ask, as non-professionals, we don't do research or teaching, so what is the use of these complex medical documents to us? In fact, as medical care occupies an increasingly important position in modern life, it is not only about our physical health but also directly affects our personal financial situation. Therefore, these documents are actually the core basis for us to exercise our right to informed medical consent. In layman's terms, they are like the product instruction manuals when we buy goods, and they are the most authoritative guides for us to deeply understand specific diseases or health conditions. Therefore, we also hope that every medical consumer, whether a patient or a family member, can gradually adapt to the rules of evidence-based medicine and develop the habit of basing health decisions on literature evidence, rather than relying on advertisements, news, or even rumors to understand and participate in their own medical decisions. That's all for today. If you found this content interesting and helpful, don't forget to give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.